What's up, guys? How's it going? It's John, Gamester81. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Generations plug-and-play console by Retrobit. This came out towards the tail end of last year, 2016. There are over 100 retro-themed games in this. A lot of licensed games from Capcom, Data East, IRAM, Jalico, which I'm sure many of you guys have heard of. And then some great titles, including Ghosts and Goblins, 1942, 1943, Bases Loaded series, R-Type, Captain Commando, Knights of the Round, which is one of my favorite arcade beat-em-ups by Capcom. It also was ported to the Super Nintendo. What's unique about this plug and play, opposed to the NES Mini, which came out about the same time, is this really has kind of a more encompassing feel to it. So basically it covers games from Game Boy, NES, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and even arcade. Basically what this thing does, it emulates these consoles. In some cases, the emulation is okay. In some cases, the emulation is not good at all, I'll be honest with you. So in this video, I wanted to share with you an unbiased review over the console itself. We'll do an unboxing, I'll show you some gameplay. At the very end of the video, I'll share with you my thoughts about the console, the good, the bad, the ugly. Is it worth picking up the Generations? There's certainly some things I really like about this console. And to be frank with you, there are things I don't really care for about the Generations. I'm a fan of Retrobit, the company that produced this thing. One of my favorite consoles is the handheld. This is the Retro Duo Portable. I did a review on this a long time ago. I love this console. If you're looking for a portable Super Nintendo console, this is one to definitely check out. The quality is amazing. With adapters, you can play NES games, you can play Genesis games, you can play Game Boy Advance games. Really cool console. I love Retrobit's products. So anyway, without any further ado, let's do an unboxing. I'll show you some gameplay. I'll show you my thoughts. I appreciate you guys leaving a comment below. I appreciate you guys liking this video. As always, let's take a closer look. So here's a closer look at the box itself. It's packed with over 100 popular retro games. I don't know if they're all popular, to be honest with you. A lot of good ones, as I mentioned before, but a lot of these games I've never heard of. So I'm curious when you guys see this video later on if you guys have heard a lot of these games. Some of these games are by a company called Pico Interactive, which it's kind of cool what they do. They actually take games that are kind of unlicensed game for the Super Nintendo and other consoles, and then they complete those games and port them over to these various consoles. So a lot of these I haven't heard of before, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of, I think it's a good thing to kind of be introduced to new retro style games, because I'm a fan of just a retro style game genre itself, right? But Gunsmoke, I mean, there's a lot of ones that you probably have heard of before. Here's the back. Some of their classic games. Mercs is, of course, classic for the Genesis. Major Title Golf, Sun, Formation Z, Bases Loaded, all that good stuff. Rival Turf. Okay. So when you open up the console itself, what you get basically with the console is the following. Of course, you get the console, which I'll show you here in a second. You get two controllers, which I think this is actually a plus for the system. These controllers obviously are Genesis and Mega Drive style controllers. They're 6-button controllers. They feel actually pretty good, and they're USB, which you can use these on your PC or other devices, which is a plus. The fact that actually the extension cord, you can tell, super long. So unlike the Nintendo Classic Mini, where the extension short cord is really short, that's not the issue. So that's certainly a positive with this. You have AV cables out as well as HDMI cable. So we'll play in HDMI, which is another perk where a lot of plug and plays, including ones by At Games for like the Genesis, are just AV out right now. There's no HDMI. So that is a plus for this console for sure. Here's a closer look at the controller. You have this mode button here. You'll notice here, this is actually a mode button. To get back to the main screen, you have to hit start and in the mode button. Mode can also be like your coin inserts. So if you're playing arcade games, you hit this up to get credits for the game. Here is a closer look at the unit itself. Let me just compare the size of this to the Mini so you can guys kind of see it. It's actually smaller than the Mini, about as wide, maybe a little skinnier than Mini, maybe a little shorter. So actually both are about the same weight, believe it or not. So I wasn't really expecting this thing to weigh a ton. It is basically an emulation machine. There are two USB ports for both controllers, which is nice. This is your power button. It'll turn red when you power it on. You have these nice little grip things to keep it from sliding. AV out, this is where your AC adapter does come with an AC adapter. And you also have HDMI, as I mentioned before. SD card slot, this is basically for you to use to put an SD card in and save the games on SD card, I suppose, and bring it to your friends. But as far as I know, I'm sure people have hacked this thing. I don't know if people have added more games to it or not, but interesting that there is an SD card slot over there. So now let's go check out some gameplay and go from there. Okay, so when you turn on the system, this is what you get. The game list is in alphabetic order. You can't sort by genre. You can't sort by system, so which is kind of unfortunate. But go ahead and check out the other settings. You can change your languages. You can do advanced settings as well. A ton of different languages, tons of different languages in the system you can choose from, as you can see here. So you can play it worldwide, I guess, which is a plus. As far as advanced settings, there's format, internal memory. You can put an SD card, as I mentioned before, in case you wanted to bring your SD card to a friend. We'll go and check out 1943 and show you how quick the load time is. It does load fairly quick. And go ahead and start game. You can save the progress later on, and this is where you would go to load your progress. You can just do up to 3 per game. And there's some internal memory on this. I'm not sure how much internal memory this system has. Graphically, when it comes to NES, it looks okay. The sound is a bit off, which I definitely noticed right off the bat. The sound is a bit off, but as far as emulation goes, as far as gameplay goes, it doesn't really affect the gameplay for NES games anyway, when it comes to the generations. It's such a great game by Capcom. I'm going to show you now a Game Boy game. This is called, the game I'm going to show you is called Alfreds Chicken. I've never heard of this game before. This I guess there's a port to the NES and Game Boy. This is by Pico. I'm not sure if this is a game that was supposed to come out initially for the Game Boy and never did, or if it's an original game. Graphically, it looks pretty good, and it does play pretty well. Visually, though, it's not even 720p, it doesn't look like, because it does look kind of washed out. I don't know how to play this game. I've never heard of this game. So I don't know if you can jump on these enemies. It's kind of, you got to figure it out for yourself. It kind of looks like a little washed out. There are no filters with the system, so you don't get the scan lines. You can't have the options to add that like you do with the NES Classic Mini. So here I am just kind of trying it out in many cases with these games. And in some of these cases, these games are in Chinese. At least the menu screen are in Chinese, literally in Chinese. So can you pick this guy? Obviously not. So we'll move on to the next game. And quick, just hit this mode and start button. And we'll go continue. This is Apocalypse 2. This is a game, from what I know, that was supposed to be ported to the Super Nintendo and never did. This is an example of the emulation being really, really fast with Super Nintendo, which is unfortunately the case with a lot of the Super Nintendo games on the generations. It just runs really fast. In this particular case, some cases it doesn't really affect the gameplay. In this particular case, it absolutely does, because it makes the game literally unplayable. Because visually the game looks really cool. It sounds really cool. And I really would love to play it, but it's just so fast. It looks like it's sped up. And there's so much going on. It's a perfect example there. I just got killed. So it doesn't really make for an enjoyable game experience, and I just died 3 times and within 5 seconds. So we'll move on down the list here and kind of show you some other games. You can hit left and right, and you can skip down other games, page down. You can change the screen size. You can go to full size, which does stretch out the screen, or you can go to regular size. I prefer the normal size. You can do the button mapping as well, so you can adjust what buttons on the controller would be. You can turn off the sound, which I don't know why you would want to, but so there are some options that you do have, which is nice. And because it's a Genesis controller, sometimes you do have to go in and map your own controller. I prefer a Super Nintendo controller when it comes to just the mapping and all, but here's an example of like a Game Boy game when it's stretched out to full screen. And you kind of see, like I was mentioning before, it is a little bit washed out. This is a game I'd never heard of. I believe it's by Jellicoe. And you're this ghost, and you can pretty much possess, you choose a character, which is kind of interesting. This game actually looks a lot of fun. I was playing a little bit, and it is a game that definitely is very, very interesting. So I'll go down the screen size. We'll show you what the original screen size will look like. It is nice that you can go back and change it and still continue the game without resetting. So that is a nice feature of the generations. You can kind of see right here, it doesn't look as washed out, and definitely doesn't look as stretched. So between the multiple emulations here, I would say the Game Boy has the best emulation for the generations. And if anything else, there's certain games on here that are worth looking into if you do decide to get the generations. Avenging Spirits, definitely check that one. Bases Loaded. This is a game for the NES I grew up playing with my friends. And you'll notice right at the back, visually it looks fine. Again, doesn't look like really HDMI graphics as it should be, because again, this is playing through HDMI. But the one thing I noticed right away is the audio is a little off. And one thing I love about Bases Loaded in general was that they had voiceovers. And, you'd hear the umpire say out or strike or ball or, all that good stuff. And you just don't get that in this version. You just don't have the voiceover. And it's something they kept out. I don't know why. Maybe it's just something when they ported over, which is kind of unfortunate because, again, this game is so much fun. I love beaming the opponent. And if you keep beaming the opponent, same character, he will charge them out. It's hilarious to watch. But Bases Loaded, there's a handful of Bases Loaded. I think there was like 4 of them came out for the NES. This includes Bases Loaded 1 or 2, as well as Bases Loaded for the Game Boy, which is a completely different port. See, no voiceover. Anyway, here's another game, Brawl Brothers. This is by Jellicoe as well. I believe this is an arcade, but again, I don't know for 100% sure because it really doesn't tell you. So it could be either Super Nintendo or arcade. I'm pretty much sure it's arcade. This is a beat 'em up. You need to select your characters. It has like a very Streets of Rage kind of feel to it, / Final Fight kind of. This is Final Fight right here kind of style look. It's a clone. Even the backgrounds look like Final Fight or Street Fighter 2. Here's a game. This is called Creepy Bird, and this is a Crazy Bird ripoff, basically a clone, and this is by Pico Interactive. And I like a lot of the games Pico does, but there's some games on the system that are frankly just kind of shovelware. And this is an example of a game that I wouldn't necessarily want to play for the Super Nintendo. Visually, it looks okay, and it plays okay. It's not really as sped up as the other Super Nintendo games, which I guess is a good thing. But again, kind of example of a game is kind of filler, it's just there. Field Combat is a classic one. Formation Z, classic NES game. Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts, rather. This is by Capcom. This is the arcade port. I just want to show you how quickly it loads. It's pretty quick. But it does take some time. Some arcade games are quick, and some games like this take some time for it to load all the ROM set. This game is so hard. It's crazy. It's a super hard game. I noticed in this way, it sounds okay. It looks okay. There's some frame rate drops, nothing major, but the arcade ports are overall play decent. Here's another arcade game I want to show you. This is Knights of the Round, and this is a fantastic game by Capcom. This is basically, a game you take Final Fight and you mix it with Golden Axe, and this is like Capcom's version of that. Use 3 different characters to choose from. This was ported to the Super Nintendo, which is kind of an uncommon game to find port for the Super Nintendo. So if you can find it, definitely pick it up. And the Super Nintendo port is a pretty decent port. But overall, it's a great game, and I'm really excited that this. I wish Final Fight was on the Generations, but I was super excited that Knights of the Round was in here because I personally like Knights of the Round a little bit better than Final Fight, in my honest opinion. But another lawnmower, I don't quite know what that's about. This is Legend E. This is a game for, I believe, the Super Nintendo. This is by Pico. This is a game that's a beat 'em up game, and I'm not quite sure. The history of it or why if it was ever released or not. But graphically, it looks, the sprites are good. The audio seems a little off with the Super Nintendo, again, going back to it being a little bit sped up. And then trying to start the game, I wasn't sure, I didn't see the start legend. I was trying to put all the buttons, and kind of odd. If the start doesn't work, it just changes the player. Took me a while to figure that out. I'm not that stupid, but apparently I am. So you just see how he just walks super fast. So So you can see it's kind of your typical beat 'em up game for the Super Nintendo. Here's another Super Nintendo game, and this is Mazazam. I actually am good friends with the programmer of this, and the programmer, this is by Pico, or released by Pico, but the programmer had no idea this game was actually on the system, so kind of odd. But this is super sped up, and I played the original one copy quite a bit, and it just totally is different than this. And the music's way off. I don't mean to keep repeating that, but I just want to show you an example of and just the audio and how much it's far off. This is kind of a fun game. You have to move these things around and kind of point as to get from one side to the other, kind of like Boxel or other games like that. But it's a really unique gameplay, one of those puzzle games. Definitely fun to check out for the Super Nintendo. We ported this over to the ColecoVision to do CollectorVision games as well, which is a good port. Here's a Night Defender. This is an odd game. Again, this is by Pico. And this is a Donkey Kong clone called Night Defender. And you play this really bear and this creepy clown as the enemy. I'm not quite sure. He's got the kid, and you're this bear rescuing the kid. I don't quite sure how it works, but clearly it's a Donkey Kong clone, and not a very good one, in my personal opinion. It plays kind of weird. But at least it doesn't play fast. I'll give him that. Here's a game I'm actually really excited that was on this. This is by Jellicoe. This is called Pinball Quest. This is for the NES. The most unique game you'll ever play for the NES. It's a pinball/RPG game. And you can play as a pinball or you can play RPG mode, which I'm playing here. So unique, so original, and there hasn't been a game like it since. I love Pinball Quest. If you have an NES, definitely check it out. I'm super excited it was actually on this list. R-Type 3, this is IRAM. And this is the arcade that they released. This might be the Super Nintendo version of the game, actually. Here's another game that I'm actually pretty excited that was on here. This is Super Noah's Ark 3D, or Super 3D Noah's Ark, however you want to call it. This game is a hard-to-find game for the Super Nintendo. It's the only unlicensed game by Wisdom Tree, came out for the console. And it's kind of odd. You have to plug in a normal cartridge on top of it in order to play it through the lockout chip. It's odd. And you'll notice here it's a Wolfenstein 3D clone. It's all religious themed. So Wisdom Tree was a Christian company, and they ported games, a lot of Christian games. And you play as Noah, and you're on this ark, and the animals have escaped, and you're supposed to like slingshot food into them and make them sleep. And the legend has it that id Software, who did Wolfenstein, was so upset with the Super Nintendo port of Wolfenstein 3D because it was all, there was no blood, that they just gave kind of the rights to Wisdom Tree to release a game. Kind of odd, but kind of interesting that that's actually on here. So you can get the good idea of what games are on here. There's over 100. I don't have time to show you them all. Mixture of some good ones, mixture of bad ones, mixture of some that play well, and others that frankly don't. So now is my conclusion. So in conclusion, what's my opinion? What's my review over the Generations by Retrobit? I'll start off with the positives. I do like the fact it comes with 2 controllers. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I almost forgot to mention, is I tried plugging other USB controllers into the system. They don't work. So these are proprietary controllers that will only work on the system. However, you can use those controllers that come with this on a PC and other units. So that's definitely a plus. I like the variety of games available. I like the fact that most plug and plays are only focused on one particular console. For example, At Games will do the Atari 2600 or the Intellivision, ColecoVision, or even Genesis Mega Drive games, where this has got more appeal, where you have Game Boy games, arcade, NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis games, all here in this one console. Pretty easy to plug in, pretty straightforward. That's certainly a plus. I like the fact that you can save the games, so that's certainly a positive. Things I don't really like about this console certainly would be the emulation isn't ideal. In fact, it goes from being okay to being straight up unplayable in some games. So you have to, it's kind of hit and miss. For the most part, the Game Boy emulation is decent. Same with the NES as far as when it comes to visually. However, audio-wise, noticeable difference and lack of channel sounds like for the NES games. Most Super Nintendo games are sped up. In some cases, it doesn't really affect the gameplay. In other cases, as you saw earlier in the video, it does, and it makes the game unplayable, which is unfortunate. The Genesis games, I haven't really noticed too much of a problem. With arcade ports, there's some frame dropping issues. Nothing too noticeable, but if you play the games before in the arcade, you may notice it. The system isn't designed for the hardcore gamer. I think this system is more designed for those who are more casual gamers who may pick this up for a friend who's not really into games. And if that's the case, if you can get this for a decent deal, then it's worth checking out. It is priced, or when it was released, it was priced at $60 US, the same price as the Nintendo Mini at the time. You can go to Amazon Prime, and I just saw it was like 36 bucks, not too bad. If you can get it for a decent deal, it might be worth picking up, if not for some of the games that are on it. However, 70% of the games on here are games I've never heard of. As I mentioned before, that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, some of the games are shovelware. I don't really seem to be a big fan of Flappy Birds. I don't really see myself playing that on the Super Nintendo, for example. But there are some games from Pico that are decent and worth checking out, at least visually appealing. But overall, out of scale of 1 to 10, I would say I'd probably give the system, honestly, a 5 to 6. There's some certain things that need to be worked on. If I were to choose between this and the NES Mini, I'd probably go with the NES Classic Mini between this, to be honest with you, just because the quality of the games are better. Another thing about this system is that even though it is playing in HDMI, which is a plus, it appears washed out. I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's a filter they have on there, especially if you stretch it to a big screen. It doesn't really look HDMI. It definitely does not look 720p, certainly, by any stretch of the imagination. So it might be a little bit better than the AV out connections, but still not what you expect to see from an HD console. So overall, I recommend this system if you are a casual gamer, if you're looking at kind of a variety of games, check out. This is definitely a system to check out. If you're a hardcore gamer and you're more perfectionist and a purist, this is not the system for you. Thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment below. I appreciate you guys leaving a comment. Please like this video. Thank you, as always, for subscribing. We'll see you guys soon. Take care, and of course, game on. First off, guys, thank you so much for watching. Also, please subscribe. That means a lot. And if you want to stay in contact, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I also have a website, Gamester81.com, and I have t-shirts available to help support the show as well. And those are available at chopchopgoods.com.